She was presented as the missing link in a seemingly flawless family jigsaw, a committed mother attuned to their beliefs, willing to fill out their idealized picture. But what if that narrative we were given was a masterfully constructed deception? Fans have been discussing, analyzing, and speculating for years. Reality Recap brings you inside the tale TLC was never able to air, an unprecedented hidden lawsuit alleging Robyn Brown sabotaging the family from the very beginning. This is not rumor. This is the inside exclusive report of the lawsuit that finally brought her to justice. What you are about to hear is based on insider reports and exclusive speculation from people close to the Brown family and their court wars. This is the tale you've been waiting for. But before we get into the incendiary court records and previously unheard testimony, I need you to do two things. 1. Hit that like button to let the YouTube algorithm know that Reality Recap deserves the truth. 2. Subscribe and enable notifications. We're going deeper than any channel has ever gone, and you won't want to miss a single exhibit. Let's begin. To see the importance of this suit, we must first learn about its radical legal premise. This was not a contentious divorce or a battle for alimony. It was a precise civil case brought by plaintiffs Kody Brown and Janelle Brown against a single defendant, Robyn Alice Brown. Kody Brown was not the defendant in this instance. To the law, he was a common good, a key component of a long-standing union that the plaintiffs argued was intentionally sabotaged by a third party. The legal complaint: horrendous interference with a family partnership. What does that even constitute? Let's parse it. Tortious interference is a legal theory generally applied to business cases. It happens when a third party intentionally destroys a plaintiff's business or contractual relationship. Let me put it this way. If two businesses have an understanding and a third business coerces one into violating it, the aggrieved business can sue the interloper. The raw genius of this approach was using business law on the non-traditional arrangement of a plural family. Legal analysts dubbed it interesting. The attorneys for the plaintiffs contended that the spiritual marriages of Kody Brown with Meri, Janelle, and Kody operated as verbal and financial arrangements sustained over decades. They shared income, owned property together, bore children in common, and operated on a system of established rules. This was a business. The Brown family business. The core allegation of the lawsuit: Robyn Brown, when she came aboard this busyness, did not function as a new business partner, but as a corporate raider. She deliberately convinced Kody to break the fundamental agreements he had made with his original partners. And what were those early understandings from the prosecution, which was being led by the keen and compassionate Eleanor Vance of Vance and Sterling? It was all explained in a dramatic opening statement. Insider news shows that Vance addressed the jury and drew not a picture of an unsuccessful marriage, but of a hostile takeover. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Eleanor Vance testified, "my clients, Kody and Janelle Brown, had been partners in a singular but deeply committed venture, an enterprise of family, finance, and faith, during which they co-parented and lived together as a family for over 20 years. They operated based on assurances of equal time, fair sharing of resources, and mutual emotional and physical support for the children they parented. These weren't romantic ideals, so much as the verbal bylaws of their relationship, honored and obeyed for more than 2 decades. And it worked. They established a life together, bought houses, and operated a complicated household. They were a team." Then, in 2010, the defendant, Robyn Brown, appeared. She wasn't just joining the team, as she insisted. Evidence will demonstrate she orchestrated a deliberate, calculated, and stunningly successful effort to dismantle that group. She interfered with, manipulated, and caused Mr. Brown to violate every fundamental promise he had made to his initial partners, channeling the partnership's most important assets, his time, money, and emotional energy, solely to herself. This is not a case of a broken heart. This is a case of a broken contract. And today, the intention is to pursue justice for that violation. Accounts state the courtroom went mute. The claim was audacious, surprising, and it totally redefined the tale fans have been following since more than a decade ago. This wasn't about Kody losing love. It was about Robyn supposedly engineering a takeover. Not surprisingly, Robyn's defense, under the skill of the notoriously hot-tempered lawyer Marcus Thorne, fought back with a vengeance. His strategy was evident: paint Kody and Janelle as bitter, jealous, Vengeful exes and Robyn as the innocent victim caught in the middle. Marcus Thorne contended, a familial partnership, a breach of contract. The prosecution is twisting corporate law to profit from their jealousy. Families change, like all families do. Kody Brown is not a community asset. He is a free will individual who makes his own decisions. He fell in love. Is that a crime now? Is it tortious interference to be a loving, devoted wife? The plaintiffs are not the victims of a corporate cabal. They are the engineers of their own despair. Unwilling and resistant to change, they couldn't bring themselves to accept when their joint husband's affections inexorably turned toward a wife who gave him respect and backup. This lawsuit is nothing but a money grab, an act to punish Robyn Brown for being loved. We will establish that this case lacks merit and degrades the very concept of family. The lines were drawn. On one side, a long-term alliance supposedly destroyed from within. On the other, a defense of a man's free will and a woman's right to be loved. For Christine and Janelle's attorneys to prevail, they had to establish two things. First, that there was a binding contract or agreement, and second, that Robyn deliberately and maliciously interfered with it. This is where the very show that made them stars became the prosecution's most powerful weapon. Their first step, create a clear pattern. They needed to prove that from the beginning, Robyn's presence was marked by a basic deviation from the family's established ways. Exhibit A, the 11-day honeymoon that every Sister Wives fan will always remember. The details were simple and stark. Kody Brown and Robyn Sullivan got spiritually married on May 22, 2010. As soon as they did, they left on an 11-day honeymoon in San Diego. While they were doing that, Christine Brown was at home in Lehi, Utah, 9 months pregnant with their daughter Truly, and just days from having the baby by herself with 5 other kids. The prosecution aired the clip that still gives fans nightmares. Christine explained, "I was a basement wife. I was a third wheel. I was just, I don't know, pregnant with Truly. And he is gone with Robyn for 11 days. Who does that? I was married to a man who was not there." Her account was unvarnished, describing the terror of giving birth alone and the overwhelming understanding that the unwritten rules of the family, particularly the responsibility to look after a pregnant partner, had been entirely disregarded. But Eleanor Vance didn't depend entirely on Christine's emotional evidence. Insider accounts uncover the real legal cleverness. Bank records from then were subpoenaed. Sources indicate they produced Kody's credit card bills for May and June 2010, indicating San Diego charges, expensive dinners, tourist spots, hotel stays, a snapshot of a free-spirited romantic vacation. They then compared them to the family's joint bank account records during the same time, regular groceries, electric bills, and the normal expenses of caring for a family with more than a dozen children. Eleanor Vance declared, "No, Your Honor, this wasn't a honeymoon. This was the initial large withdrawal from the family's emotional and temporal bank account, deposited entirely into the defendant's account. The agreement of this family business had stipulated that Mr. Brown's time was a joint resource. In coaxing him to make this long soul trip at a time of utmost exposure for another partner, Miss Brown was not merely beginning a marriage. She was instructing Mr. Brown that it was fine to violate long-standing commitments to the others. By doing this, she was renegotiating his agreement without the other partner's permission. Robyn's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, attempted to dismantle this under cross-examination. He portrayed Christine as insecure and petty. "Mrs. Brown, or is it Miss Red? You were jealous, weren't you?" Thorne asked. "It is that easy. You courted Kody, you honeymooned, and you couldn't bear to see another. Younger women do the same." But based on insider sources, Christine's reply cut with lethal accuracy. She replied, "No, Mr. Thorne. I was joyful when Kody courted Meri and Janelle. I was delighted at their joyfulness. What I couldn't understand was the hypocrisy. We had a system. We had rules to ensure everyone, and the children primarily felt safe. This wasn't a vacation. This was a man leaving his 9 months, pregnant wife and 5 children to do so. In 16 years, nothing like that had ever occurred before. It began with her. Boom. Christine never made it about jealousy. She repositioned it as a violation of procedure, a transgression of a 20-year-old understanding. The prosecution argued that Robyn, being the direct beneficiary of that breach, was the catalyst. She might have insisted Kody, proposed a shorter visit, or done anything for the family's established order. Her failure to do so, they argued, was not negligence. It was intentional interference, establishing a precedent that her needs always would take precedence. The honeymoon, they declared, was merely the opening salvo. Then the prosecution followed, moving from emotional neglect to outright financial disaster. One they accused Robyn of orchestrating. The relocation from Las Vegas to Flagstaff became one of the most tumultuous pages in the history of the Brown family. On television, the strategy was simple. Sell the 4 Las Vegas coal, Dusak houses, invest the money in buying a large tract known as Coyote Pass, then construct either one large house or several houses on the property. It was supposed to be a return to their communal beginnings, a uniting venture. But financially, the plan was tenuous. They had multiple mortgages, the Vegas housing market was sluggish, and liquid cash was limited. For the relocation to work, each member had to be tight, patient, and make sacrifices. As Meri once described it, they had to behave like a team. The prosecution contended this was the point. Robyn committed her most harmful act of financial tampering. Kody himself confessed. The goal is to get us all together. The goal is to get on the property. We have to make sacrifices to get there. The offering was simple. Rent houses in Flagstaff temporarily until the Vegas homes sold and new construction at Coyote Pass started. Meri, Janelle, and Christine obeyed. They secured rental houses, disrupted their lives, and endured short-term hardship for the long-term aspiration. Robyn did not. That's when the prosecution called a surprise witness. A name that, according to insider reports, sent shockwaves through the courtroom and rattled Robyn's defense team, a former senior story producer for TLC who had worked on Sister Wives during the Flagstaff transition. For protection, we'll call her Sarah Jensen. Her sworn testimony, or so it was reported, blew the case wide open. She informed the court that the on-screen narrative, that Robyn just couldn't find a decent rental, was all made up by Robyn herself. Eleanor Vance questioned, "Miss Jensen, could you explain the situation with the rental houses for the Brown family in Flagstaff?" Sarah Jensen replied, "It was tense. We had found some big rentals that would fit Robyn, Kody, and her 5 children easily. One of them in particular, a lovely 5-bedroomed place in a good school district, stood out. Janelle and Christine went and saw it and thought it was ideal. Production was prepared to sign it up. And what did she do?" Vance asked. Robyn turned it down. Jensen said, off camera, she was firm. She insisted that renting was below her, that she'd been given a spiritual vision that her family required the security of a bought house. She bemoaned the vibration of rentals, not being able to get roots down. Every day, it was something different. Eleanor Vance inquired, "So what did she do?" Sarah Jensen said, "She made an ultimatum with Kody. I was in the transitional housing when it occurred." The cameras were off. She was sobbing, explaining to him that she felt the universe warning her that if they didn't purchase a home, then the relocation to Flagstaff was an error, and perhaps she and her children should re-examine their place within the family. She told him, point blank, "I need you to be a man and buy me a house, or I don't think I can do this." It was an ultimatum, a direct threat to leave unless her demand was met. This became the smoking gun, the clear sign of intentional interference. The prosecution traced the economic domino effect of that ultimatum. Worried about losing his preferred wife, Kody capitulated. He coerced the family into spending their meager cash reserves to meet the down payment on an $890,000 house for Robyn. A forensic accountant was subpoenaed to testify. He testified to this one purchase under coercion from Robyn's threat, being the very event that derailed the Coyote Pass venture. Not only did it devour the cash required to start digging, but also imposed on the family another suffocating mortgage before the Las Vegas properties had even sold. The effect was immediate and devastating. Janelle, whose life savings had gone into the property, was forced to live in an RV. Christine was forced to live trapped in a temporary residence, her dream destroyed. The prosecution claimed that Robyn's actions were not those of a partner but of a saboteur, someone who puts her own comfort above the family partnership's shared financial well-being, and agreed on plan. She had already caused Kody to violate emotional commitments on the honeymoon. Now, they maintained, she had pushed him into violating his duty of loyalty to the family itself. The defense panicked. How could they rebuff sworn testimony from a producer with TLC? Marcus Thorne attempted to portray Sarah Jensen as a disgruntled former employee with an agenda, but the damage was done. The specifics were too detailed, too consistent with what viewers had already witnessed transpire on camera. The jury was captivated by now. The prosecution had created a pattern of behavior, emotional testimony, fiscal records, and a devastating insider witness, all serving the same conclusion. Robyn's reign was under attack for the first time, not only in the court of public opinion, but in a court of law, and the prosecution was just getting started. To come in part 2, they reveal still more incriminating evidence. From the failure of a family business to the draconian rules that broke them apart. And then, the coup de grace, Robyn Brown herself testifies on the stand under cross-examination. So merciless, it would remake the Sister Wives saga. You will not be able to miss it. Welcome back to Reality Recap. In part 1, we took you into the secret lawsuit against Robyn Brown. We exposed the prosecution's audacious argument that the Brown family was an emotional and financial partnership, and that Robyn deliberately dismantled it, driving Kody Brown to break his vows to his other wives. We witnessed the evidence of the notorious 11-day honeymoon that destroyed sacred family rules. We learned the jaw-dropping testimony of a former TLC producer who revealed Robyn's ultimatum regarding the Flagstaff house, an ultimatum that put the family into fiscal ruin. That was only the tip of the iceberg. However, Eleanor Vance and her staff were set to roll out a slate of exhibits establishing Robyn's interference wasn't a string of isolated incidents, but a deliberate multi-year campaign to gain complete control of the Brown family's assets and its patriarch. And longtime viewers will recall the next installment, My Sister Wife's Closet, debuted in 2012. It was the family's ill-fated, but ambitious foray into e-commerce. Billed as a joint venture, it assured viewers that all 4 wives would bring their special talents. Meri had a business background. Janelle was the practical one. Christine added the creative touch, and Robyn placed herself as the designer. And soon enough, de facto CEO. Janelle once said, "This is something we can all do together, something we can all share." The prosecution positioned My Sister Wife's Closet, MSWC, as a reflection of the whole family dynamic. It was intended to symbolize equality, but ended up being yet another display of Robyn's dominance and Kody's favoritism. Court documents, bank statements, and LLC records indicated that although collective family funds paid for the business, almost all operational power and decision-making rested in Robyn's hands. They brought in a witness, a contract designer, who was freelance to create the MSWC website early on. His evidence was incriminating. The business had been touted as a joint venture among all 4 wives, he said, but in fact, almost every decision passed through Robyn. She controlled fonts, product images, and ultimate layouts. When Christine or Meri did have a suggestion, he would mock it up only to then get a call from Robyn, sometimes with Kody listening in, instructing him to destroy it and stay with her version. Robyn would tell him, "The others are investors, but this is my creative baby." To the designer, it was obvious who was in charge of the project. The prosecution contended that by monopolizing the business and ignoring her partner's feedback, Robyn had sabotaged the family's agreement. MSWC was supposed to be a source of income for all of them, but she took it down her own troubled direction, without Christine, Janelle, and Meri being involved. Books and records told the rest of the story, significant family investment up front, followed by poor sales, a high operating expense, and eventual failure. One business analyst testified that failure resulted from inadequate market study and failure to evolve, errors squarely on the shoulders of Robyn's management. Eleanor Vance put it concisely. The defendant grabbed a shared family asset, pushed aside her partners, operated it by her whims, and destroyed it. This wasn't merely a business that failed. It was a power grab at significant cost to my clients. Exhibit C solidified the prosecution's financial takeover theme. But what followed cut closer to the bone. Their subsequent evidence focused on the exact moment that shattered the family apart before the country. The COVID-19 pandemic was a global crisis. But for the Browns, it was a test of loyalty. Prosecutors alleged that it was manufactured by Robyn to have the monogamous marriage she had always dreamed of, behind the facade of health and safety. We all witnessed it happen. Kody, citing caution, enforced severe distancing measures. They were so draconian that going to Janelle or Christine, whose older children worked, attended school, or socialized, was essentially impossible. Meanwhile, Kody and Robyn created their own bubble of solitude. Christine openly questioned, "I don't get it. What are we doing? This isn't a family." The prosecution's case turned chilling. They argued those rules weren't really about health. They were a calculated act of interference. Robyn, they said, used the pandemic as cover for Kody to break the very core of plural marriage. His presence to strengthen their point. They called an expert in high-demand groups and coercive control. The sociologist testified, "What you've described is a textbook isolation tactic. In plural marriage, time is most precious for the husband. These laws provided a justification to monopolize that resource for one wife only. By presenting them as inviolable security measures, the defendant placed the others in an impossible dilemma: either sever ties with their children and obey, or forfeit access to their husband. It was a calculated deployment of crisis to consolidate power." The prosecution provided a timeline of dates, demonstrating Kody had lived well over a year and a half at practically every moment at Robyn's residence. Over that period, his relationships with Janelle, Christine, and their children fell apart. He missed graduations, birthdays, and even Isabel's surgery. Testifying on the stand, Janelle explained how difficult it was to observe her husband opt for absence over family. "For years, Kody split his time," she said. "It wasn't ideal, but he showed up. He was a father to my children and my spouse. And then, overnight, there were expectations we needed to abide, expectations that Robyn and Kody maintained in their house. But if my sons couldn't abide by them because they worked, Kody simply stopped appearing. It seemed like my spouse was being held captive, and the ransom was the autonomy of my children. That is a decision no mother should have to make." The prosecution alleged Robyn, as the co-author and sole heir of those guidelines, intentionally interfered with Kody's position as husband and father to the other families. She used a virus to sever the ties that had held the Browns together. It was her most brazen and successful attempt to date. But lawyer Eleanor Vance wasn't done. She had one final display, Exhibit E, which targeted the family's legal and religious foundation: the annulment of the first marriage contract. It was 2014. The Browns, who were still in Las Vegas, appeared to be at the height of their prosperity, and then the bombshell: Kody was divorcing his one and only legal wife, Meri, in order to marry Robyn. The reason behind it, as cited, was altruistic: to adopt Robyn's 3 kids and provide for their future under the Brown banner. Meri explained, "If I'm the one who has to do this so Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna become Browns, then I'll do it." It was framed as an act of sacrifice. The prosecution had a different interpretation, though. It was not adoption, motivated but a deliberate move by Robyn to fundamentally alter the power dynamics of the family. The legal marriage to Meri, as opposed to the spiritual ones, provided her with the foundational status of being first wife. By convincing Kody to annul that marriage and legally marry her, Robyn had engineered a legal coup. Meri was next asked to testify. The atmosphere was charged. Her dynamic with the rest of the group had always been tense, and nobody had any idea what way she'd go. Vance interrogated her warily. "Mrs. Brown, when the possibility of divorce was suggested, whose suggestion was it?" Meri answered, "It was given to me as a family necessity. Kody and Robyn brought it up. And did you have an actual choice? I felt pressure." Meri acknowledged, to be a team player, to do the right thing for the family. "If I didn't, I'd have been selfish, prioritizing my status over the kids' best interests." Vance went on, "Now that Kody moved the legal marriage to Robyn, has your contact with him and family resources changed? Have they increased or decreased?" Meri spoke in a somber tone. "They've decreased greatly." It was a devastating discovery. The prosecution contended that although the adoption guaranteed the children's status, its ulterior motive was to remove Meri from her position and promote Robyn as legal matriarch. The action conferred binding authority of property and decision, making on Robyn over all other wives. It was the ultimate act of interference, irreversible and absolute. With 5 damning pieces of evidence: the honeymoon, the housing ultimatum, the business takeover, the enforced isolation, and the legal marriage coup, the prosecution rested. They made a 10-year pattern of deliberate disruption. Now it was the defense's turn. Marcus Thorne had just one chance remaining to place Robyn Brown on the stand to give her version. The day that she came forward to testify, the courtroom was jammed. This was the big moment everyone had been waiting for. Could she convince a jury that she was not a cool-headed saboteur, but rather a victim who was misunderstood. Under the gentle guidance of her attorney, Marcus Thorne Robyn presented the account of things her supporters have come to believe. In tears, with her voice shaking, she stated, "I never intended to create trouble. I just fell in love with Kody and with the vision of the family. I wanted my kids to have a loving father and a big, pretty home life. But from the beginning, it hurt. I was like an outsider. The other wives had their past, their jokes. They never really drew me in. Every step I took was under scrutiny. I was criticized." She responded to each exhibit with innocence. "During the honeymoon, Kody made me feel special. He organized everything. I didn't know Christine was ready to give birth. I was newlyweds in love. Was that so bad? The rent scared my children. They'd already experienced so much instability. I wanted them in a secure, permanent dwelling. I never issued an ultimatum. I just explained my fears to my husband, and he listened. He is a good man who didn't want his children hurt. I gave myself to my sister wife's closet. I worked day and night. It was my passion project. The other wives did not have the same dedication. Its failure was not my failure. I was terrified during COVID. I have small kids. I just wanted to save them. Kody dictated the rules for our safety. I just followed my husband's instructions." Her testimony portrayed her as the faithful wife, the overbearing mother, the zealous follower. Marcus Thorne ended with a final question. "Miss Brown, did you ever, at any point, willfully and knowingly interfere with Kody Brown's relationship with his other wives?" Robyn cried outright. "Never? No. I loved my sister's wives. I mourn what we lost, but I will not be held responsible for the decisions of a man. I did not steal Kody, perhaps. Perhaps they drove him away." The defense rested. Robyn's words hung in the air, but had she spoken enough? Then Eleanor Vance stood for the cross-examination. What ensued, sources indicate, was surgical legal deconstruction. She came to the stand with not anger, but biting, icy calculation. She started softly. "Miss Brown, you've insisted over and over again. You only followed your husband's initiative. Let's examine that. When Kody made the COVID regulations, isn't it the case that a nanny was permitted in your household?" "Yes," Robyn replied. "We had to have someone assist with the children. And this nanny," Vance went on, "she had her own children, her own grocery runs, shopped at the store." "Well, yes, naturally. So Kody's own sons. Janelle's children, Garrison and Gabriel, were too hazardous for him to visit, but a paid worker with her own home and contacts was okay. How does that add up, Miss Brown?" Robyn bungled, not being able to offer a precise response. Vance continued, her voice biting. "You swore you didn't know that Christine was as close to delivering when you went off on an 11-day honeymoon. Miss Brown, you courted this family for months, even taped a television show about them. Are you expecting the jury to accept that throughout that entire period? The fact that the family was expecting the birth of their 16th child was not once discussed." The room fell silent. The question cut like a knife. Vance pressed further. "On the $890,000 home, you say you merely voiced fears, yet the family's plan, one you knew of, was to rent. Isn't it true that by forcing the purchase, your household lived in luxury, while Janelle Brown, a partner of nearly 30 years, was left with an RV on undeveloped land?" "I didn't force anyone," Robyn replied. "Janelle chose that. Did she have an alternative?" Vance retorted. "Or had you already leached the family's capital through your house acquisition, leaving her without funds to construct? You didn't merely join a family, did you? You took control. You ostracized the patriarch, rechanneled the finances, and undermined the partnership step by step until you were the sole wife standing." "Wasn't that just what happened?" Robyn cried out in the stand. But her tears were no longer those of a victim. They appeared to be defeated. Vance's cross had shredded her tail, exposing the contradictions and self-serving reasons that others had long suspected. The closing statements were little more than a ritual. Marcus Thorne attempted to appeal to love and the divine institution of marriage, but the jury had already witnessed the proof. In her closing arguments, Eleanor Vance simply wove the threads together again, portraying Robyn not as a classic homewrecker, but as someone who destroyed a long-standing business, one whose product had always been family. Silence followed. The jury departed. Christine and Janelle sat together side by side, fingers intertwined. Kody, who was in attendance for the trial, sat behind Robyn, his face immobilized in icy rage. The wait started. 2 days passed. Then the jury came back. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and addressed the plaintiffs. He declared, on the issue of tortious interference with a familial business relationship initiated by plaintiffs Courtroom and Janelle Brown against defendant Robyn Brown, we the jury find the defendant liable. Gasps spread throughout the courtroom. Janelle had reportedly let out a quiet sob of relief, burying her face in Christine's shoulder. Christine did not move, one tear running down her cheek. Robyn sank into her hands, her body shaking with sobs as Kody put a protective arm around her and glared at his ex-wives. It was a clear win, but the decision was still up to the judge. The judge, who is famous for his experience in complicated corporate cases, was interested in the novel application of law. In the case, in his verdict on damages, he made a statement that, sources say, swept rapidly through legal circles and amongst committed admirers of the trial. He granted Christine and Janelle each $250,000 in punitive damages, with Robyn required to pay $100,000 for deliberately disrupting the family's established dynamics. And then he read his summary into the record. For more than a century, the tort law of interference has protected business agreements. This case presented a new question. Can a family, particularly one so specifically structured and financially interdependent, be deemed a partnership deserving equal protection? This court is convinced that it can. The evidence establishes that prior to 2010, the Brown family worked under a constant, long-standing, unwritten agreement of financial and emotional equality. My decision today is not a ruling on plural marriage, or love or religion. Although this court cannot adjudicate matters of the heart, it can adjudicate matters of contract. Robyn Brown did more than just sign up to a family. She dismantled it by convincing the patriarch to forsake the preemptions of financial and emotional equity he had made to partners of over 2 decades. The taking of her home at the expense of the collective, the isolation of the patriarch under the guise of protection, and her insistence on legal ascendance were not the moves of an actual partner. This was not passive integration. It was a campaign of action, of interference. The damages are not intended to mend hearts, but to offer compensation for a shattered partnership. The judge's words thundered. It was final affirmation. A court of law had acknowledged what Christine and Janelle had always known. Their family had not merely come apart. It had been systematically torn down. The consequences were similarly incendiary. The stories reported Kody and Robyn having to sell their $1 million house to pay damages and attorney's fees. TLC was in disarray. The sister wives' story was legally established as a hostile takeover. For Christine and Janelle, the cash was never an issue. Winning was truth itself. Their hurt, their truth, and their decades long relationship had been legally validated. They lost their husband and the family they had established, gained, instead, something infinitely more: vindication. The Brown family saga is a cautionary tale about love, religion, and the vulnerability of human relationships. And with this scandalous, precedent-shaping lawsuit, it becomes one too of responsibility. A tale of 2 women who refused to fade away quietly, who fought back, not with faked emotion on television, but with facts and evidence heard in a courtroom. They demonstrated that even in the most unlikely families, promises hold value. Written or not, agreements count, and no one, even the preferred wife, is beyond the law of consequences. So, what do you think? Was justice really served here? Was this a masterstroke of clever legal maneuvering, or did it cross the line? Share your verdict in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Reality Recap, where we keep revealing the truths that television won't reveal to you. Thanks for reading.